Let's begin. Number 8, the invisible finish line. Picture this: you're running at full speed, giving everything you have, and suddenly it hits you. You don't even know where the finish line is supposed to be. That's the first hidden psychological trap behind the feeling of being behind in life: the invisible finish line. No one ever handed you a clear map of where you should stand at 25, 30, or 40. And yet, somehow, there's this quiet, persistent sense that you've missed something. But here's the truth most people overlook: that feeling doesn't come from reality, it comes from comparison. Your mind, without asking permission, starts collecting fragments of other people's lives: engagement photos, promotions, transformations, milestones, and stitches them together into something that looks like a standard, a timeline, a benchmark. The problem? You're comparing your unfiltered, behind the scenes reality to everyone else's carefully edited highlight reel. Of course, it feels like you're falling short. From a psychological standpoint, humans are wired to look for structure. In school, you had grades. In games, you had levels, clear indicators of progress. But life offers none of that. So when that structure disappears, the mind doesn't relax. It hurts, it panics. And in that panic, it starts inventing rules out of thin air. I should have more money by now. I should already know what I'm doing. I should feel confident at this point. Notice something. None of these rules were ever officially given to you. You never agreed to them. No one sat you down and said, "This is the contract." They just appeared, quietly, like spam emails that slipped through the filter, and now live rent-free in your head. What makes this even more intense is the way modern culture worships timelines. Before 30, by the end of the year. In your 20s, they sound harmless, almost motivational. But to your brain, they act like deadlines, without any instructions on how to meet them. And when you don't, your mind doesn't ask questions, it jumps to conclusions. Something must be wrong with me, even when there isn't. Here's the irony most people never stop to consider: there is no universal finish line. Some people start fast, rush ahead, and burn out early. Others take longer to begin, but build something that actually lasts. Feeling behind isn't necessarily evidence that you're failing. More often, it's a sign that you're measuring your life with a ruler that was never meant for you in the first place. And once you truly see that the finish line is imaginary, something shifts. The pressure doesn't disappear completely, but it fractures. And through that fracture, something new begins to emerge. Curiosity slowly starts replacing shame. Number 7, temporal shame. Have you ever felt embarrassed? Not because of something you did wrong, not because of a mistake or failure, but simply because of your age? Just the number on the calendar, that's temporal shame. It's the quiet belief that reaching a certain age automatically means you've somehow done life incorrectly. And what makes this kind of shame so dangerous is that it doesn't scream. It whispers. You're too old to start. You're too late to change. People your age should already have this figured out. Pay attention to one word here, or should. That single word carries most of the psychological weight. Because once should enters the picture, reality stops mattering. From a psychological perspective, this happens because humans tend to anchor identity to age. We treat time like a scoreboard. Every birthday starts to feel less like a celebration and more like an audit. Your brain begins scanning your life, checking for expected achievements. And if it doesn't find them, it doesn't question the expectations. It questions you. But here's what often gets ignored: time doesn't distribute opportunity equally. Two people born in the same year can live completely different lives: different access to resources, different levels of safety, different mentors, different trauma, different luck. And yet, temporal shame acts as if everyone ran the exact same race, like wearing the exact same shoes. What really intensifies this feeling is visibility. You don't see the quiet stories, the people who restarted at 35, 40, or even later, and slowly rebuilt their lives without announcing it to the world. What you do see are the loud exceptions, the early success stories, the viral breakthroughs, and your brain makes a critical mistake. It confuses what is visible with what is normal and reacts accordingly. Temporal shame also creates a kind of psychological paralysis because once you believe you're late, every decision becomes heavier. You're no longer just choosing a job, it feels like you're choosing your last chance. You're not exploring anymore. You're calculating risk like everything could collapse with one wrong move. Ironically, that pressure doesn't speed you up, it slows you down. The truth is simpler than it feels. Time doesn't punish curiosity, it punishes stagnation that's driven by fear. People who stop growing aren't actually too late, they're just afraid of being seen. Starting again. Number 6, the comparison hangover. Comparison rarely hurts in the moment. At first, it feels almost useful, motivating, inspiring. You look at someone else's success and think, I want that too. But then, hours later, something shifts. It hits you, heavy, foggy, draining. That's the comparison hangover, the emotional crash that comes after you measure your entire life against someone else's 5-second update. Your brain is naturally wired to compare. It always has been. In ancient environments, comparison helped humans survive. Who had more food? Who was stronger? Who was safer to follow? But today, that same mechanism has no off switch. It runs constantly, fueled by endless exposure to other people's lives. And the real issue isn't comparison itself, it's the scale. You're comparing your process to someone else's outcome, your effort to their result, your uncertainty to their certainty. And because you don't see the full picture, your mind fills in the gaps with assumptions. You imagine their success as smooth, fast, almost inevitable, while your own path feels slow, chaotic, and uncertain. This creates a distorted self-image. You begin undervaluing your own growth simply because it wasn't loud, because it wasn't visible. Learning quietly doesn't count. Healing internally, invisible, changing direction, feels like failure instead of courage. Over time, these comparison hangovers train your brain to associate other people's success with your personal failure, and that's where it becomes dangerous. Because success isn't contagious, but discouragement is. And here's where the real shift begins, not by trying to eliminate comparison entirely. That rarely works. The change happens when you stop comparing position and start comparing direction. Are you moving forward compared to where you once stood? If the answer is yes, then you're not behind. You're in motion. And motion is the only measure that truly matters. Number 5, late bloomer anxiety. There's a very specific kind of panic that appears the moment you realize you might be a late bloomer. Not because blooming later is inherently wrong, but because everything around you subtly suggests that early success is the standard. As if your worth is somehow tied to how quickly you figure it out. Late bloomer anxiety isn't just about what you're doing, it's about when you're doing it. Your mind keeps circling the same question: why didn't this happen sooner? As if growth follows a strict schedule, as if there's some invisible factory timeline you were supposed to keep up with. But psychologically, that assumption is flawed. Human development isn't linear. It doesn't unfold in a straight, predictable line. Growth tends to happen in waves, sudden expansions followed by quiet integration. Some people appear to bloom early because they were given structure, clarity, or support from the beginning. Others bloom later because before they could grow, they had to untangle chaos, unlearn patterns, or carry weight they never chose. Late bloomer anxiety ignores all of that. It compresses your entire past into one harsh conclusion: I wasted time. But most of the time, that's not accurate. What looks like lost years were often years of survival, years of adaptation, years of slowly understanding what doesn't work, years of carrying emotional or situational burdens that delayed visible progress. And here's the part people rarely talk about. Late bloomers often build something stronger. They tend to be less naive, less impulsive, more self-aware. They don't chase every shiny opportunity. They choose with intention. But anxiety doesn't let them see that. It convinces them they're fragile. behind, running out of time. When in reality, they're often just getting started. Blooming late doesn't mean blooming weak, it usually means blooming with depth, with roots. Number 4, identity lag. Have you ever had that strange feeling where your age says one thing, but internally you feel like you haven't fully caught up? Like your life moved forward, but your sense of self is still catching up behind it? That's identity lag. It happens when your external timeline evolves faster than your internal integration. You've changed roles, moved places, aged numerically, but inside, your identity hasn't fully processed those changes yet. So even if everything looks fine on paper, something feels off. Psychologically, identity forms through reflection, not speed. But modern life rewards speed, fast choices, fast results, fast reinventions. There's barely any space to pause and actually understand who you're becoming. So your identity ends up trailing behind your reality. That gap creates discomfort. You begin to feel like an imposter in your own life, like you skipped an important step and now you're improvising your way through everything. But this isn't incompetence, it's lack of integration. People experiencing identity lag often hesitate over simple decisions. They question their preferences. They struggle to confidently say, "This is who I am." Not because they don't have an identity, but because it hasn't stabilized yet. And that instability gets misread as failure. In truth, identity lag is a sign of transition. You're between versions of yourself, and transitions are not meant to feel smooth. A caterpillar doesn't look certain halfway through transformation. The real danger is rushing to define yourself just to feel caught up. Identity doesn't respond well to pressure. It settles through lived experience, not declarations. Feeling behind here doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're still in the process of becoming. Number 3 is productivity guilt. You wake up tired, you get through the day, you do a reasonable amount, and somehow it still feels like it wasn't enough. That's productivity guilt, the quiet emotional burden of existing in a culture that equates worth with output. It convinces you that rest has to be earned. That effort only matters if it's visible. If you're not exhausted, maybe you didn't try hard enough. If you're not constantly busy, maybe you're falling behind. Psychologically, this happens when identity becomes tied to usefulness. Somewhere along the way, I am gets replaced with I produce. And when output slows, because of burnout, recovery, or simply being human, your mind interprets it as a problem. This distorts your perception of time. Days spent thinking, reflecting, or recalibrating start to feel wasted, even though they're often essential for meaningful progress, so you start rushing. Stacking tasks, multitasking your own mental bandwidth, trying to outrun the feeling. Ironically, that pressure reduces real productivity. Guilt drains focus. Pressure suffocates creativity. Exhaustion makes you inefficient, not effective. Feeling behind in this case isn't about laziness. It's about expectations that don't align with how humans actually function. Because humans aren't machines. We operate in cycles. Energy rises and falls. Progress expands and contracts. But guilt demands constant acceleration in a system that was never designed for it. You're not behind because you needed rest. You're only behind if you never question why you're running in the first place. Number 2, existential catch-up mode. At a certain point, the feeling of being behind stops being about external things. It's no longer just about money, career, or relationships. It becomes deeper, more existential. You're no longer trying to catch up to other people. You're trying to catch up to life itself. That's existential catch-up mode. It's when time suddenly feels louder. Years seem shorter. Decisions feel heavier. You stop asking, "What do I want?" and start asking, "What can I still realistically do?" Psychologically, this happens when awareness grows faster than clarity. You begin to understand the stakes, but you don't yet feel grounded in a direction. That gap creates pressure. Not because you missed something specific, but because you now see how much there is to miss. And that realization triggers urgency. People in this state often try to accelerate meaning. They rush into decisions, relationships, careers, lifestyles, hoping one of them will finally make things feel settled. Anything to quiet the sense that time is slipping. But meaning doesn't respond to speed. When rushed, it becomes fragile. This is where urgency gets mistaken for importance, where intensity replaces alignment. And when that doesn't resolve the emptiness, it reinforces the belief that you're even further behind. But here's the uncomfortable truth that also brings relief: no one ever catches up to life. Life isn't a train you jump onto before it leaves. It's something you participate in imperfectly, inconsistently, without a final checkpoint. Feeling behind here isn't failure. It's often the first sign that you've become aware, that you've woken up to the reality of time. And that awareness hurts before it becomes clarity. Number one, the narrative trap. The deepest reason people feel behind isn't time, it isn't comparison, it isn't productivity, it's narrative. Humans don't just experience life, we interpret it as a story. The narrative trap happens when your life stops matching the story you believed it was supposed to follow. A clear beginning, a steady rise, predictable milestones, a satisfying resolution. But real life doesn't follow clean structure. It's non-linear, messy, full of detours, restarts, and unexpected turns. And when your experience doesn't match the expected storyline, your brain assumes the issue is you. You must be off track, off schedule, off script. And because stories are powerful, that belief starts shaping everything. A setback becomes confirmation, a delay becomes evidence, a pause becomes a verdict. That's why two people can live through the same situation and feel completely different about it. One sees a chapter, the other sees a failure. Same reality, different narrative. Rewriting that narrative is difficult because at first it feels dishonest. The old story, even if it's harsh, is familiar, but narratives are not facts, they are frameworks. And frameworks can change the moment you stop asking, why am I behind? And start asking, what kind of story am I actually living? Something shifts. You move from judgment to curiosity, from shame to authorship. You were never behind. You were just telling the wrong story about your timing. That's all. That's it for today. I'll be sharing more videos like this soon. Subscribe if you want to keep exploring. Don't forget subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications.